One of the key aspects of making a great track starts with making a great melody, as our melodies are a very powerful way to facilitate our feelings to our listeners. Do you remember the first time you heard this? Or maybe this. We are demystifying the melodies today. Jump in. So before we start with all this theory, I want to mention something. Music is always about the freedom, and I'm giving all this theory to you to help you craft your own universe. So don't feel bound by them. Feel really free to break them if you feel it's necessary. But in short, a melody is linear succession of musical tones that listeners perceive as a single entity. A melody consists of 6 different elements. The first one is of course a scale. Basically means that a set of different notes that are ordered by the fundamental frequency or the pitch. Simply put, these are the notes that we feel familiar to use when we are giving bass note. For the electronic dance music, the common scales are the major scales and minor scale. Techno being techno, chromatic scales are also popular in techno music. Range is the distance between the lowest note in a melody and the highest note in a melody. But we have to consider 2 different important aspects. When you use a wider range, that tends to create a really dramatic sounds because of that super lows and super highs being in the same melody. Take an example of this short phrase here. When the range is really short, it sounds just like a regular melody. When we increase the range into 2 octaves, it gives completely different feeling. And the other important thing when it comes to the range is that the tighter ranges oftentimes much easier to hum to or sing to, and hence they tend to be more catchier than wider ranges. Contour is basically pitch changes that are happening in a melody. If you try to draw a line, just go through all the different notes that you are using, it gives you the contour of a melody. And depending on how your contour looks like, it will reflect different feelings. Do you want to give this uplifting feeling? Try ascending contours. And if you want to release, for example, a tension in a track, try descending contours. Contour comes also with a motion. Motion means that the dynamic jump from one note to other one. If you want to give a sophisticated feeling to your melodies, you can try to use a dynamic motion, meaning that the ups and downs are quite often and the melody feels really dynamic. For example, if you want to surprise your audience, you can try to use the spikes. Spikes mean that this sudden jumps in your notes. Which brings us to the intervals. It is basically the distance between 2 different notes. So the melodic interval happens when you play 2 notes after each other. Let's say you are playing from a 6th to 5th, a perfect 5th. It will give you this satisfactory feeling. But if you go and do other way around, 5th to 6th, it will give you the tension. Feel like the melody is not concluded yet. And for example, long-time watchers on this channel will know how much I love 156, which is a kind of defined melodic techno, simply because it's giving this uneasy, melancholic feeling and being kind of overutilized in the genre as well. I know this sounds a bit weird, but a melody has also structures in them, like a track having different structures in it. Maybe you have heard that the A section or the B section or the C section of a melody, and sections in melodies are used to keep consistency while changing or evolving the melody during track. For example, you may start with the ABC at the beginning of the track and recycle the first part of the melody A section, and then use the C section instead of B and go B, and then go back to A again. And then finally, maybe when you are reaching the highest point of the track, you change the melody to the BCC. And this slow change and evolution in the melody makes the melody more interesting while keeping the consistency and making everything a bit more glued in the melody itself. And the final element, this is actually not something you would find in the classic melody theory, but it is what I call a color and the tonality. As we are making electronic dance music, the sound design itself and how it is pronounced is really important and change the character of the melody completely. So you have to be really careful about this newer side of creating melodies. It's really extremely important for electronic dance music. And once we know the cells of a melody, we will take one step further, because not everything is melody, and it's important to understand those different concepts when you're thinking about the melodies in your track. There are actually more than 3, but I simplified them again one step further, and I call them 3 siblings, and these are the motifs, phrases, and melodies. So first of all, the concept of motifs, phrases, and melodies is open to interpretation, and interpretation really changes in different genres. We will again look at this from the electronic dance music perspective as usual. So the first one is the motifs. You can consider this as a shortest idea that can be detectable by the listeners. You often see this distinctive pitch and rhythm combination, and they tend to, in electronic dance music at least, at 2 to 5 notes, I will say. So they are pretty short. I will use the analogy here. Let's take a look at the sentence. We make music because we love music. Here, we and music is short, is just a word, but it's a very distinctive. We is we, but make, for example, requires something to it. So make what? So it's not really that distinctive and obvious. And if you go back to the, for example, music, music is music. It doesn't need anything else. And if we take an example from the melody, for example, the music here, let's create a super short idea that has an identifiable content. When it comes to phrases, this is really important to mention, because phrases could be actually longer than the melodies in the classical music theory. But when it comes to the electronic dance music, I really think them as like the shorter version of the melodies, and they express a definitive melodic idea. So like melodies often made up of phrases, but oftentimes you need more than one phrase to complete the melody. And if you take a look at our sentence again, we make music. So it definitely creates an idea, but then we have, because we love music, to complete our melody, so it needs something else to make a full melody, full story. And if we go back to music again, so let's take this one step further and try to express a melodic idea that we can develop upon later in our melody. So we will go for something like this. So here we feel like a closure, a clean idea, as we are going to develop this and build upon a melody. And finally, it comes back to the melody. The main idea, the main difference is with the melody is like when we have a melody, our listeners will think it as a single entity and we won't need anything else. It's like a short summary of the track. And that's why they are oftentimes really important, because you want the summary of your track really good. So if we take one step back and take a look at an Ableton. This is our motif. This is our phrase. And from there, I use the motif and the phrase together and add a bit of variation like this, ending up this melody. So first melody type that we are looking for is the lead melodies, and these are probably the most important for many people. Main characteristics of this type of sounds are they tend to utilize a bigger range and they tend to evolve during the track. They may have a more complex contour, they include more motion, and they can even include more motifs. But these are really dependent on the genre. In one genre, they could be completely different to the other genre. So here the boundaries are not that clear, I will say. So we have this loop over here. So we need a lead melody right here. So if you think about the theory, we need something dramatic. So we want range. We don't want something super complex because we want it catchy. This is techno. We don't care about the scale because this is techno. And of course we care about the sound itself. I have a preset like this. Very aggressive, very rich, perfect for a techno sound. So idea is basic here, right? We want to utilize a bit larger range, so something like this. We want a less contour because we want something a bit more catchy. So let's stay around here. But we want our range to make it dramatic. So as you can see, I really don't care about the scale at all because I want this really weird dissonance in the sound to make it even more techno. So let's go for something like this, right? Let's play together the track and see how it sounds. Isn't this just perfect? If you're enjoying the video, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps a ton, it keeps me motivated so that I can make more videos like this in the future. And maybe even more important for you is that at 100k we will making a remix challenge from a famous producer, and of course there will be hardware and software giveaways just to celebrate 100k. But let's go back now. One thing I would like to really point out that the melodies doesn't even need to be single notes. It could be also a chord progression. In this case, I have this small chord progression. You can even argue if it is a melody or if it is actually a phrase, but I would go for a melody because it is the only thing that is used in this track. This is a very typical thing, especially in driving main room techno tracks. And if you play it together with the loop, sounds like this. So we have another loop here. This time is from Pruida. Alright, what is the first thing that comes into your mind when we say Pruida? I would say really strong beat together with very catchy melodies. Hence, from our theory, what do we remember about catchy melodies or catchy lead sound? First, I will say our range will be short, we will avoid really dynamic motion, we will keep the contour smooth and simple, get an interval that everybody knows, and use a nice preset that reflects the original Pruida sound. It's something like this. Here we already catching up this Pruida sound. But to make it more obvious and expressive, we need the phrase, meaning that we can clearly hear the idea here. So right here, we definitely feel like there's a Pruida sound. It is there, but it's not complete. We definitely understand the idea, but it doesn't feel like this completeness with the melody. Take a look one more time what happens when I just finish the melody. Right here, now we feel much more complete. Again, you feel like it's not 100% complete because this is a looping melody, so the main purpose of this, like, never really 100% finishing the melody so that we can always come listen again and again and again. But it's much more clear melody compared to phrase. One more time, if I play faster. Right here is beautiful pretty melody. And if we play this together with the track, this brings us to back melodies. So, and the second type of melody is the back melodies. As they are sitting in the background, they tend to be not that dramatic. So they are simpler, they utilize less contour, less range, less variation, and less motion as well. Again, you don't want them to take over your track. The main purpose is basically filling up the track, so the making the ambience stronger. And sometimes this can even emphasize a specific emotion with the main melody. So they can act like an auxiliary melody, I would say. And the pretty example here is a very perfect example of auxiliary background melody. This melody is repeating itself quite a bit during the track, but at some part there's a back melody coming in and completing even more this main melody sound. I'm not gonna play it one more time because it's the same ideas all over. I'm just gonna scroll to this part of the track. The main difference between back melody and main melody in this case is just the melodies are mainly ascending, so that is creating this kind of uplifting feel in the chorus of the track. Basically, that's the main purpose of this melody. Take a listen. If we play together with the track now, all makes much more sense. So let's take a look at a bit closer to this background melody thing. I have another example. So I have this small break right here, but I need the enhanced ambience and I want to use a back melody to do that. Sounding like this. So what we can do, we want something simple. Remember, back melody, we don't go for too much contour, we don't need something super complicated. The main focus is enhancing the ambience. Isn't this beautiful? So if we play together and try this out. Almost feels like we can add another background sound here just to enhance the beginning of the drop again, or the beginning of the rhythm again. Remember what we did in the techno track, creating this kind of not following the rules. It was something like this, and we're gonna use the same idea, but this time we go something a bit less tension or a bit less dramatic. Something like this. So let's try one more time together with the track. Isn't that just so beautiful? So when you use the background melodies right in the places, they can make huge differences. Let's do it one more time. Let me show you one other thing. Alright, when we think about the background melody, we don't need to always think about the main melodies. We can even consider the bass sound and use it as our background melody. So we have a synth wave track sounding like this. So the question here is, wouldn't it be really beautiful if we change the bass and have some type of background melody to enhance the ambience a little bit? So I'm thinking like something like this, right? The main original melody goes like this. It's always the same. What about if we move around a little bit? right? Dun 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 dun. So have kind of a chord progression style, also in kind of a melody. And on top of that, let's make it a dramatic. What makes something a bit more dramatic? Giving a bit of range and having a kind of a fast jump to another high sound. That then gives really this emphasis on the drama. And let's play together with the track and see if this fits. And the final one is FX melody or the color melody. There is no rule here. The main purpose is just creating some kind of a sound on the background that fills the space and enhance the ambience. You can do whatever you want to do as long as it fits the track. I have a loop like this. You know what would be nice here? Ethereal melodies in the background filling the space. I have a preset already. Very pushed back, a lot of effects, delays, reverbs, whatever on it, making it really ethereal. So, or maybe something like this. These type of melodies are really hard to play in the real time because there are a lot of effects. So I'm just gonna let it play and show you the notes instead. I think it makes it super obvious why these are called color melodies.